Hello, this is Jed Brewer with the Below the Line Club and Study Groups. I hope you're having a really good day and had a terrific Thanksgiving weekend last weekend, however you ended up ultimately celebrating it in this crazy year. Today on our webinar, we're going to talk about tools to protect fuel margins and also ways to optimize pricing. Lots of changes are taking place in our industry, in our global economy and our local economies, in part due to COVID and in part just to technological change that's out there. And as technological changes continue to happen, it's provided new opportunities, particularly how we buy and price fuel. And so today we have two folks, David Thompson, who's the Executive Vice President of Powerhouse. He'll be sharing about tools to protect fuel margin, more on the buy side. And then Mark Truman, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Petrol, will be talking about ways we can price fuel using some technology to give us advantage in the marketplace, some more on the pricing side. Just briefly about Powerhouse. So Powerhouse, they're based out of the Washington, D.C. area and Virginia, just outside of D.C. They're a brokerage company, so if you want to do hedging or any kind of contract buying, they're the firm to talk to and do it with. And then Edge Petrol, Mark is actually based out of the UK, but they work in Europe and then also in the US, helping people through automation to price fuel and have technology that allows you to do it more efficiently, moving more towards automation. So I'm really pleased to have these two experts here on the call today to help us understand fuel, because we all know if we can just shave a fraction of a cent per gallon, whether it's on the buy side or on the pricing side, that's dollars that flow to the bottom line. It can be very meaningful over a lot of gallons. So with that in mind, we are recording this. There's going to be two slide decks from David and Mark. We will send out the recording and those slide decks to people afterwards. At the same time, we encourage you to ask questions as we move, because we'd like to get those answered and have this be as educational as possible. And please type in your questions into the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar dialog box. I will be able to read those questions, and then I can relay them to either David or Mark at the appropriate time. So that's what we're going to do today. Will be 1 hour, and David, I'm going to give controls over to you, and we'll go ahead and dive right in.
Okay, great. Looking like everything is on the screen, we can get rolling. Thank you to Study Groups and Jed. It's always a pleasure to speak with everyone here. We've worked with the Study Groups for a number of years and been proud to be part of the Below the Line Club for several years as well. And wanted to get into some things that we hopefully will find of use for you. And really, as Jed said, talk about how technology is changing and how this affects you. Obviously, we've been doing business a lot differently this year. And one of the things I always talk about with people when we're bringing up these conversations is understanding how things are changing and how the fuel business, the fuel marketing business, is moving online. It's moving to a digital format from the era of fax machines and paper. And some of you will remember the era of time where we sent out price changes by fax in the evenings. That's all changed, as we well know. People are now buying and selling gallons, through their computers. And this is not just wholesalers buying from their suppliers. Many marketers are now selling gallons online, and understanding that customers are doing their buying and selling online. And that's the real topic that I wanted to dig into during my time with you all today, is how we can look and understand what those changes mean and how you can adapt and meet the most important part of all of our businesses, which is what your customers want. The changes that are coming along, we see more and more. I've noticed it in all of our marketing, especially this year. All marketing has to be optimized for viewing on a phone. People are getting their information that way, be it price information, grade and quantity information, news about what's going on. All these things is coming digitally and through phones and mobile. So we have to be able to move quicker, because really that's what online The one thing I draw an equal sign in my mind with is online equals speed. People are getting information quicker, they're making decisions more quickly, and that means we as people trying to seek their business have to be able to respond faster. Some of the tools we're going to talk about today do a great job in helping you do that. I want to start with a couple of real-world situations to get into things that hopefully will resonate with you and have solutions that can solve these challenges for you. Many times we deal with customers, as Jed said, we act as their hedging advisors and developing and implementing hedging plans for them. And it's quite often the case that you as a fuel marketer will have good customers who buy a significant amount of gallons from you, but they don't always do it in even contract size, 42,000 gallon per month size. But you get challenged with many times a question like this: hey, I need 7,000 gallons a month for the first half of next year. Can you give me a price? The customer I'm selling it to is going to be coming back to me a lot of times, so it's going to end up being a lot of volume, but here's what I have right now. What do you do as the fuel marketer when your customer calls up with that type of a request? You can obviously call your supplier and ask for a quote on a fixed forward deal. You could also do what we call creating a dirty hedge, which would be using a single futures contract somewhere in that 6-month strip to act as a price protector. Or you could wait and see if your sales team could round up some additional gallons and put that all together and then apply a hedge that way for them. There are problems with each of these approaches, though. Your supplier is always going to add a little bit onto that price because, in essence, you're asking him to do the hedging. And they'll be happy to do so, but you just added to your bottom line, to your cost. And that puts you in a challenging position with your customer because now your cost is a little bit higher. The dirty hedge is by definition inaccurate, and it's inefficient in the sense that it's not covering the exact need that you have. And the third option, waiting until you have enough volume, well, that can be problematic because your customer may or may not wait for you. They always have other options. So that's one challenge. Let's go to another challenge that we often hear a lot about. Let's say you're a heating oil distributor. You're getting ready to launch your winter heating oil price cap program, and the sales team comes back and says, well, it's not going so fast this year, but what are you going to do? You have to determine when to buy your options to act as the protection in your price cap program, be they call options or put options, whichever way you're going to do it. Do you just go and buy the options now? You don't necessarily have all the gallons matched up for them, so you'd be overhedged potentially. Do you wait to add in the hedge, but tell your sales team, put on some extra, cushion under our price quotes to cover the possible market movement price between now and the time we do buy the options? Again, these are ineffective answers to the problem because you're really facing this challenge of aggregation. The hedging tool in 42,000 gallons a month is fine for those types of pieces of business that come in 42,000 gallon increments, but that doesn't always happen. And in fact, a lot of times very good business doesn't come in 42,000 gallon per month increments all the time. There are more effective tools out there, and the part of which this conversation relates to, a lot of these things are web-based, and that's what we want to talk a little bit about today. And as I say on the bottom of the fourth slide, your customers can always look somewhere else. Don't give them a reason to do so. I would always prefer that my clients call us first and always, and that's, I'm sure, the approach you have with your clients as well. So what are these new tools that we have? Basically, you can now look to online platforms to do customized hedging through swaps. And we're going to talk in the next two slides what the difference between a swap and futures are. But they're similar. They're financial instruments that act as protections to allow you to quote either a fixed price or a cap price. But the developments that have occurred recently is that a lot of this is now all web-based. You could literally have the app available. You can go to the website on your tablet, on your phone. You can be sitting in your car, in your truck before you go in to visit a customer. You can pull up a price quote. You can refresh it. You can save it. It's very, very marketer friendly, I call it. It allows you to do what you need, which is get information to build a quote to your customer quickly, effectively, and manage the risk management side of your building your business and making sales in a much more efficient way. As I mentioned, these are swaps, not futures contracts. So there's still a financially cash-settled deal, but it's between two parties, not through the exchange, not through the NYMEX. These are what are called swaps. Large numbers of energy market players offer them. Banks, big energy companies, reinsurance companies, specialized energy marketers. They can be very highly tailored. Most importantly, for purposes of our conversation, tailored in terms of the quantities available. Swaps tend to be either very large transactions or very small transactions, because clearly, if you use a futures contract in that 42,000 per month size, that sort of fits that middle territory. They do require an ISDA agreement, which is the swaps governing document. And there are credit facilities available, usually between the counterparties based on their credit. But the most important thing, of course, with the swap is that the other side of the deal is your counterparty. So each side evaluates the other's credit. That's what backs those deals. Since the financial crisis, all the swaps are now regulated. This is a big change. The Dodd-Frank reforms cover all swaps now. I won't go through all the nuts and bolts of Dodd-Frank because that would take far more than the short time I have here. But the important thing to know is that to transact in a swap, you have to be an eligible contract participant. That means if you're hedging commercial risk, you have to have a company of net worth of at least $1 million. So that's the threshold to meet it. So these are, serious commercial entities involved in this. But what can we do with this? We talked about some of the challenges that we face.
Quick question for you, David.
Yeah.
I'm just curious,
Sure.
In your experience, what rough percentage of petroleum marketers do you think are engaging in swaps?
It varies. I would say, it depends. If you're talking about those who are hedging, of the ones who are hedging, it's growing. Probably not more than half, but it depends on their needs. I think a lot of people are getting more customized and understanding that, the days of being, sort of close but not exact can sometimes leave some money on the table. And as we're going to talk a little bit in the next couple of slides, it opens up a lot of marketing opportunities, which I always talk about how hedging has two components: defensive, where you're protecting inventory you own, and then offensive, where you can go out and create unique marketing proposals for your customers that really meet their needs and don't ask them to sort of compromise on what they're really looking for.
Yeah. So it's certainly opportunity for growth.
Exactly. The first example, if you remember back, the first challenge I mentioned, I said, what happens if you have a customer that calls up and needs 7,000 gallons a month for the first 6 months of next year? Obviously, as we understand, that works out to a total of 42,000 gallons, which is one standard futures contract, but they don't need 42,000 gallons in 1 month. But if they're going to keep coming back, again and again on this size deal, that's good business. You don't want to turn that away. Nor do you want to, add enough to your quote to cover, a little bit of what I call a fudge factor of, well, I'll wait until I get some more volume aggregated, and then I'll get a futures hedge on for all those months. That could take days, weeks, who knows how long. Now, with the Custom Quotes platform, you can go in and literally craft a customized hedge with any number of gallons per month. In this case, it was an even 7,000 gallons per month. You load that in literally in a matter of, less than 5-10 minutes. It wouldn't even take you that long once you understand what you're doing in the website. You can go through, you can plug in, be it 7,000 a month or 50 gallons a month, whatever you would need. You can plug that in and run a quote on a fixed price. As I said, you could do this sitting in your truck waiting before you go in to meet a farmer. You can do this on the phone. You can refresh it as many times as you need it. You can save it in your application. So if you quote a guy on Monday and he says, I got to think about it, and then he calls you back on Thursday, you don't have to go and type all this back in again. You simply hit refresh. There you go. You can give him his number, and you now know where you can hedge at. So you can then base your price quote to him. Let me go to another slide. This is something that goes back to that same idea that we had a few slides back about a heating oil cap program. We know customers who are literally doing this exact type of thing. You'll notice in the upper left-hand corner under volume, it says 800. That's 800 gallons. That literally is the size of one homeowner. So let's say you were marketing home heating oil. In this case, I threw in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania as a geographic representation and built a heat curve for the remainder of this winter, December through April, on the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania heat curve, and said, what if a customer called up and said, I need 800 gallons of heating oil for the rest of the winter? What could you offer me on a fixed price for a cap? I'm sorry, not a cap, not a fixed price, but a cap program. In other words, protection on the upside, but if it's warmer, I get a lower price. You could build a cap program for 800 gallons per season, for the entire season, not 42,000 gallons a month, 800 gallons total over 5 months. And you could come up with an option price here. And if you see over on the right-hand side of the screen of $12.81, that's 12.81 cents added on to the call strike in the quote summary of $1.3702. In other words, if you're thinking a little bit ahead, you can see that you could literally market a heating oil cap program customer by customer, as opposed to waiting to aggregate enough volume on your price cap to pull the trigger on the hedging instrument at that point. This is literally revolutionizing how heating oil marketers can have a flexible approach to marketing their cap programs without taking more risk than they desire. Let me go to the next slide. This also is available for propane. For the propane marketers listening, it's very hard to get effective price quotes sometimes on small gallon amounts when you just have to pick up some little piece here or there. And again, you have that challenge of, do I wait until I aggregate enough gallons to call and get a bigger piece from a supplier? With this, you could do a fixed price for, be it 15,000 gallons a month or 1,000 gallons a month. And the prices tend to be very, very competitive on the platform as well. So this applies to gasoline, heating oil, diesel, propane, natural gas, crude oil as well. And the really exciting thing, and the last part I wanted to talk about, is there also will now be the ability to protect against the effects of weather. And this is really something that you might say, wow, I can't believe this exists. It does. You can look at the impacts of what I was going to speak about in the couple of slides here is the impact of heating degree days for people who are marketing home heating oil. It can also price out risk protection against too much or too little rain, which could apply very keenly to gasoline marketers who also have car washes. We don't have enough time to go over everything, so I just picked the heating degree days as an example. But it's a way to look at, say, if I'm marketing home heating oil and I protect myself for my price risk, but what happens if I have a volume risk in that it's warmer than expected and I don't sell these gallons? I need some type of a financial offset if the winter weather doesn't accrue enough HDDs. Let me give you a couple of little overviews of what the slides look like on the platform. You can go in and select from, in the small print, it shows there are over 16,000 weather stations available globally, scores in the US, all based on airport weather stations. So you can find very customized weather data. You're not just buying LaGuardia weather insurance, if you're anywhere in the East Coast, or O'Hare insurance if you're in the Midwest. It's highly, highly localized. You can go in, and again, I picked Harrisburg as just a nice representative area, to look at. You get historicals. This is much different than if you've ever looked at weather hedging before. It's much more transparent now. The marketers who are offering this insurance wanted to be clear what the numbers we're all agreeing on to base the insurance off of. So you can see historical details for how many heating degree days in each of the last X number of winters Harrisburg, Pennsylvania racked up. You can look and see what the level of times different protection levels had payoffs in the past. So you can really get a clear, transparent view of the history of where you're at. You can go in, once again, in the case of saying, I'm worried about a warm winter, in essence, what you want is a put option, something that protects on the downside if there are less heating degree days than you model into your pre-winter calculations. You can go and figure out, and this is the part the marketer has to do, of what financial damage does my business suffer if we have one less heating degree day in my marketing area. And that determines what your tick size is, if you notice in sort of the bottom center of the screen. In other words, that's how these insurances pay off on a lack of heating degree days is for each heating degree day less than your protection level, you get some amount of financial payoff, dollars per lost HDD. That's what that tick size is. So then this is what the nuts and bolts of things look like when you build a quote on a heating degree day put option. You can look and see, okay, I want to have a protection level that's 15% below the normal winter. That's when my business would really start to be hurt. And I want to have protection that says in that red circle, I get paid $500 for each lost HDD below 2269, that upper number highlighted by the arrow. So that's saying in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, if I had a winter that was 15% warmer than normal, anything worse than that, I want to get paid $500 for every less HDD I receive. And for that insurance policy, the premium cost would be the $27,300 up in the upper right-hand corner. So you can literally develop these types of things. As I said, for heating degree days, you can have it for rainfall amounts that would affect car wash activities, things of that nature. Really fantastic tools to address risk, so you're not just stuck taking what Mother Nature gives you. You're not stuck waiting to aggregate. You're not stuck waiting to get a number from a supplier that adds to your cost that you're going to have to quote to your customer. These are things that help you make you more efficient. And really, that's sort of what we look at these benefits of being able to customize your hedging. You can do a better job protecting budgets, protecting inventories. You can look at ways to not have to add on as much of that fudge factor, as I said. So that, in essence, is lost margin. And you can control prices in ways where you're not waiting and spending time to aggregate volume before you put your hedge on, because that's really what you're exposing yourself to when you're waiting during those time periods. And this gives you the ability to be much more competitive. You can look out many years in smaller gallon amounts where getting a fixed forward is more difficult. These things are quite liquid, several years. So these are things that are very, very attractive when you're trying to find new ways to compete. And that, in the end, is the real key of what we're all talking about, how to grow your business by being more efficient and being able to respond more rapidly to your customers' needs. And we always say that the best way to integrate this and understand this is to start small. Look at, when you start doing this, you'll see your business in different ways. And you'll start to realize there were deals that you may have just not competed on because it was too difficult to manage the risk. Now you can give those a shot because you can protect yourself. And that opens up the door to a whole nother class of business sometimes. And it certainly allows you to compete on more business and more opportunities. So if there's any other questions from Jed or anybody else, I'm happy to take those now.
David, if you're new to getting into hedging, doing this kind of activity, do you find in these benefits that you listed kind of the lowest hanging fruit areas that are easiest to take opportunity of, or that applies to most marketers?
Well, I tend to think some of those smaller gallon size deals, I think many times a marketer might look at them and say, well, they're not that great. They're a pain in the behind to hedge and to protect myself on. But now you can literally hedge those 25,000 gallon deals very quickly, and they offer the opportunity to put some nice margin on them because probably nobody else really wants to throw out a super competitive price on those either. So you can protect yourself and still have a nice margin. I think especially with the volatility we've seen in winter weather, the idea of the CAP program still has a huge appeal to the homeowner, but it's so difficult for the marketers to launch and manage because of the speed with which prices change. This allows just a much more rapid way to get your business hedged as you're booking it. And so I think the idea again of give the customers what they want. It's always good to have a fixed price, certainly if they want that, but why not have both and have that both A and B and have the cap available, but not have to subject yourself to all that risk of when do I buy my option to protect my cap program. But the sort of those two, I think, are the most useful sort of low-hanging fruit to go after.
Yeah, thank you, David. And then another question, just as it relates to the correlation between my market and whatever hedge it is I'm buying. It sounded like on weather, you said it's kind of based off my local weather station or pretty close to it. So my weather factors into the equation. Is that right?
Correct. On the weather hedge, it's by airport weather stations, of which there are scores of them. So those are localized, correct. And it's agreed upon index that both the other side.
That's great to hear. Have there been any advancements on like gas and diesel? That's one of the biggest concerns I hear is, whatever pricing is in my market isn't same as the NYMEX or whatever, and so there's lack of correlation. But any advancements there?
Not the prices for gasoline and diesel are still based off the NYMEX contract, so it's still that New York Harbor contract. The one good thing I would say is that Powerhouse does a lot of work with our customers on understanding what their historical basis numbers are, and we dig down very deeply to get literally monthly data for localized areas to understand what you're exactly correct. The market, the diesel basis market in the Pacific Northwest is far different than it is in the Mid-Atlantic. But they do follow historical patterns, and we do a lot of analysis to try and understand those to address that piece of it. The hedging tool still sticks with the NYMEX price. On propane, however, this is a wonderful situation that the propane marketing business, everyone negotiates that basis with their supplier and sort of defines that ahead of time in what I always say is a very gentlemanly way to run an energy market, as opposed to having diesel be one thing, one price in one location, something completely different 60 miles away. Propane's much more organized in it, and there the ability to hedge either the Conway or Mont Belvieu index in customized gallons at times of your choosing really becomes valuable.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, David. And again, for the audience, if you got questions, feel free to type them in. We'll address them at the end. For now, we're going to pivot over to Mark Truman at Edge Petrol. And Mark, tell us a little bit about how technology is changing on the pricing side.
Sure. Thanks, Shed, and thanks, David, as well. So obviously super relevant, procurement into pricing, especially for our customers and our market, which are on the retail side. Can you just to check everyone can see the right screen? We've got the right screen up, Jed?
I just see a blank white screen right now.
You can see a blank white screen.
Yeah, blank white screen. I see your mouse moving around.
Okay, that's peculiar. Give me a second. The technology is always a problem. We tested it before.
There we go. I see it now.
Yeah.
You go on to slide.
When I full screen it disappears, right?
Yeah, it disappears. Maybe just do it out of the not in slideshow mode.
It's gonna have to be.
Yeah.
Okay, bear with me a second. All right, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so let me move this down and we're good to go. So changing world of fuel pricing. So strategies that are being deployed at the moment and when we should use them. So my name's Mark Truman. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Edge Petrol. We are a software startup based out of the UK. And we've recently, well, I say recently, over the past kind of year, we've been moving into the US. I was supposed to move to New York myself in April, but sadly that was not possible. But we have a team based over there now, and we're growing quickly over in the States. So that's who we are. So what do we actually do? So we actually build pricing software that for retailers that want to keep control of their pricing. So there is actually a lot of pricing software out there at the moment for kind of larger players who want to, or who provide the opportunity to automate pricing. But what we focus on is customers who are still using spreadsheets, right? Retailers who like to keep control. And our customers are retailers like yourselves, the people that are on this webinar, that deleted their spreadsheets and are now gaining a market advantage by using Edge Petrol. And they're seeing upwards increases of around 18% in fuel profit by having access to that real-time data. Let me just scroll that across. So why does fuel pricing actually matter? Well, according to this year's NACS survey, 58%, and you guys, you have to bear with me a little bit because I don't have my notes showing now, but 58% of customers, price is the dominating factor for where they choose to fill up their tanks, right? As where they fill their tanks. And that's a pretty large number, but it's actually come down from around, I think, 72%, that one's off the top of my head, since 2015, according to the same survey. And when you think about it, that actually means that 42% of the market are using something other than price to make a decision based on for where they fill up their cars. So what does this mean, and what are the challenges that retailers are facing? So first of all, you have market consolidation, right? So we all know that recently Marathon sold Speedway. We know that EG Group are picking up sites left, right, and centre in the US and in other places. You know, it's very rare that we speak to a retailer that isn't being approached. I spoke to a gentleman the other day who's saying at least once every 6 months I'm getting a formal bid for my portfolio of 16 gas stations, right? And this is good and bad, right? It's bad in the way that you'll never compete with these companies on economies of scale if you have a smaller portfolio. But as a smaller portfolio, you are more agile and more able to do things, right? And furthermore, these particular, these large corporations, they have demanding investors, right, who are expecting them to increase EBITDA and see a return on the investment that they've allowed this particular retailer to make. And that causes a problem for them and for their returns, because we're in a market which, whilst NACS actually tells us that more people are now driving, so I think it's around 24% of people are driving versus 22%. 24% of people are saying they're driving more versus 22% of people who say they're driving less. Generally, when you speak to the market, certainly at the moment, we're in a depressed volume situation. And if we think about one of our customers and also a below the line member, Greg Huff from Huff Petroleum, you know, Greg has been planning for this scenario for a long time. So it's not just a COVID related issue, that volumes are reducing, and that, you know, certainly a lot of the big supermarkets and the big chains are taking up a lot of that volume regardless of price, right? So what's actually happening in the market right now? So firstly, there are signs that automated pricing to grab volume is trending down. So I don't know, obviously I'm not aware of the portfolios that are on this call, but if you're situated near a Speedway or a Wawa, someone along those lines that probably uses some kind of automation software to make sure they're the cheapest in the market. What we've spoken about, and a couple of retailers out of Maryland actually pointed this out to us originally, that they feel like there's a lot more manual pricing work going into those decisions now with the bigger companies. Due to the fact that COVID has reduced the volumes and it's a little less predictable than it was before the cycles, this is providing them with a challenge of sticking to their we want to be the cheapest or we want to match the cheapest philosophy. And that's great for other retailers. I mean, opportunities are already out there, but new ones are being created. And therefore, the real question is, for you in your portfolio, why does fuel pricing matter to you, and what can you actually do about it? What are the options available to you? So the first thing that we recommend that our customers and also non-customers that we speak to do is assess the factors that they're prioritizing when they're setting the price for their pole signs, right? So typically when we speak to retailers, there are three things that go into that pricing decision: volume, margin, and competition. And when we speak to companies in the States, the first thing that we noticed when we moved over from the UK is that volume is very volume driven, right? And there's a few reasons for this. One, fuel supply contracts tend to be a little bit shorter than they are in the UK, but also based on the fact that there are rebates for certain levels of for hitting volume with certain suppliers. So you might sign a deal, especially for jobbers, and not necessarily so much for dealers, but in some cases as well. Jobbers will have a certain level of volume that they need to hit, and then they'll receive a rebate from their supplier. So that's one of the reasons that it's quite big. And also market culture is in some states, in some areas across America, what you'll find is that the customer culture is really to seek out the cheapest. There is a culture in certain micro markets that mean that really no matter what you do, you kind of have to match the cheapest, or you're going to have a real hit on volume. However, that's not always the case for every station, and what we encourage people to do is to make sure that when they're looking at volume and competition, to make sure that margin number that they've got in their head, which is really the number one number that is influencing fuel profit, right, is taken into consideration. And one of the reasons that we're so strong on that is because we've worked out with a couple of other retailers that a 5 cents per gallon increase in margin is equivalent to about a 25% increase in volume. And actually, as Greg Huff pointed out to me in a previous webinar, you know, Wawa, for example, they're going to take their volume anyway, right? You know, he was saying to me that he goes and buys his hoagies from Wawa. Now, I still don't know what a hoagie is, being from the UK, but I'm assuming it's some sort of food. I also assume he still fills up at his own station. But Wawa has a cult following. They're going to take your volume no matter what your price is. So some markets, you want to be maintaining some of that margin. You don't always want to be matching and following, because effectively you're allowing someone else to set your pulse on price. And when you're looking at margin, assessing the methodology that you're using for cost price is really key. And we typically find that there are two methodologies that people are using on a day-by-day basis in their spreadsheets, which tend to come up. And replacement cost is the number one that is being used. So the majority of retailers we speak to, they'll be looking at the cost of today's fuel in order to understand what their margin is. And the problem with that is that you might not even have taken a delivery today or be taking a delivery today, depending on how quickly you turn over your tanks. But also you've got old fuel from different prices, right, that have arrived days earlier that you paid a different price for that you may not be taking into consideration. So we found that some smaller retailers are moving into last delivery cost. And what that is saying, okay, well, I took a delivery 2 days ago, let me cost up all my fuel against that. And we found that it has the same problem. It's a little bit closer, very difficult to do when you're running a larger portfolio of stations, but it's also still not giving you that accurate margin number. And that's why we came up with the concept of blended cost. So what actually is blended cost? So what Edge Petrol do, and this is something which is difficult to do without software, but possible, is we are connecting to the point of sale, to the tanks, to the ATGs. We're connecting to your cost prices, so whether that's from OPIS or DTN, or you're a dealer that's getting it from a jobber. And we're weighting and blending the cost of the fuel that's in the tanks in real time. And as transactions leave the tanks, we take that off the oldest cost price and we reweight and blend to provide a live weighted and blended margin. Now, what you're looking at on your screen here is I've taken a section of blended cost, which is the blue line, versus the replacement cost on average across all Edge customers between kind of mid-December through to March the 30th. And to maintain the anonymity of the margins of our customers, I've removed the axis on the left. But what you'll see where the orange arrow is where that was just after OPEC. It was around about UK lockdown time as well, but it was just after OPEC announced that they were going to be increasing production. Oil prices plummeted. It cost more money to store oil than it did to buy it, right? There was no storage space, and prices plummeted quite heavily. And what you'll notice is that green number, that replacement cost number, plummets pretty hard and fast, right? Whereas the blue line, which is the blended cost, is taking into account the old fuel that sat in the tanks and telling you, hold on a minute, your fuel is not as cheap as you think it is. And we were seeing up to 77 cents per gallon difference between replacement cost, the number that a typical retailer is using at the moment, versus the blended cost, which is the real cost of product from their tanks. And if I was to ask any of the retailers who are listening in here, how many of you would make a different pricing decision if you had a 77 cents per gallon difference in cost? I don't think any of you would say anything other than, I'd have to change something, regardless of what my competition are doing. So that's why it's really important to have a handle on that information, because you've got those competitors and you need to decide, are you going to follow, are you going to stick, or are you going to twist? And the next piece of advice that we tend to hand out is to constantly review your premium grades or even your cash credit spreads, right? So most people will sell an 85 or an 87, and then a premium grade, maybe a 93 on their station, something along those lines. Some do, some don't. And in this particular example, this is one of our customers that ran a trial initially for 3 weeks and then 2 weeks. And their strategy was to increase their premium grade by 9 cents per gallon to test the sensitivity of the grade and see how it influenced their profits. And their profit increase in the first trial, which is the middle column, 3 weeks, was that they increased profit by 10.89%, but sadly they lost 5% of their super grade customer base. Now, it's not clear from this graph, but their actual non-super volumes went up slightly to cover that. So it was people choosing not to take a super grade, but to take a regular grade. So they decided to see what would happen if they pushed even further. So they pushed to 14 cents per gallon, right? Higher than 14 cents per gallon more than the original price. They saw a total profit increase from premium grades of 23%. But what was interesting is it had very minimal impact on the volume from the previous trials. And the point is that the actual price sensitive customers, well, you'd already lost them in the 5%. So this extra 5 cents per gallon increase on top of the 9 cents per gallon, that was just free money, really, right? And you can see there they grew profits on premium grades by almost 24%. So I don't know, it depends how much premium grade you sell, but I'm sure on this webinar there are a lot of people who can imagine how much an additional 24% of premium grade profit would be worth to them. Maybe a few golfing holidays or something like that. But you've got to amend your strategies to your business needs. So it's not only about it's not only about, can I raise my margins, because anyone can raise their price to get more margin. But this was a really smart move from one of our customers, where they decided to put a decrease to try and encourage more people to buy the premium grade instead of the regular grade. And they saw an impact on in the first they did this in 2 4-week trials. And whilst they lost a little bit of profit, they saw that more people were buying premium grades. So they went even further and they double dipped and they moved that to 10 cents per gallon. They grew the premium grade volume quite considerably because it was so close to their regular grades, and they saw a 3% profit increase. But what's nice about that is they were they're effectively incentivizing people to buy more premium grades and giving them a cheap option to do so with their stations. We've also seen retailers take from their regular grade prices and up their premium grade prices so that they're kind of almost supplementing the price using the premium grade to keep their volumes high on the regular grades in the market. So it's all about give and take. It's a combination of what can I give back to my customer and what can I take, and that means that just employing one strategy of I'm going to follow my competition, I'm going and religiously at every single station, is probably not the one that's going to optimize your profitability. And talking about giving, here's a really nice example from one of our customers in the UK. So to explain the graph that you're looking at here, you can see that we've got the green line running along the top. That is the gross margin, the gross blended margin across the month of August last year, right? And they're running at about 10 pence per litre. So to convert that, it's about 40 cents per gallon, right? So they've got a decent gross margin in there. But because we recognize the card that comes in at the point of sale, we're able to identify in real time what the cost to them or to you is as a retailer of accepting that particular card. And in the UK, fleet cards are a big deal. So typically that impact happens during the week rather than at the weekend. In the US, it's the other way around. At the weekend, you get more people coming with credit cards, and therefore your net margin goes down at the weekend. But what you can see on this blue line is that net margin, so with card fees taken out for fleet cards. And you can see at the weekend that there's a penny to 2 penny increase, right, on the margin that the customer is making. And the customer didn't know this before. This was new information provided by Edge Petrol. And we had a meeting to discuss, well, this is new, and it was new to us as well at the time. What do you think we could do with it? And they decided to put the price down by 2 pence, so that's around 8 cents per gallon at the weekend, so to give that back to the customer. And what they saw was a 35% growth over 3 months in weekend volume. So they were winning new customers at the weekend. Profit was flat. I mean, that tells you something, that 8 cents per gallon is equivalent to 35% of volume. But profit was flat, but their subway sales went up, their in-store sales went up, their car wash sales went up, their lottery sales went up. And amazingly, and the best part of all of this, in my opinion, is they were able to increase the midweek volumes 10%. And they were seeing on their average fill-ups, which they also see through Edge Petrol, they were seeing their average fill-ups were going down, but the number of transactions was going up. And what was happening is the weekend customer, the price-sensitive weekend customer, was coming back during the week to buy fuel to fill up with £5-10 or $5-10 in order to keep them going until the cheaper price of the weekend. And that obviously gave them quite a considerable profit increase by growing their volumes 10%. So there's some real hard examples of where testing and understanding your stations and questioning, yourselves and the way that you're looking at that data can be really impactful and powerful for your stations. And that's why we talk about the road to true optimization. And what we found is the majority of retailers do tend to sit in the bottom left corner here, whereby there's a relatively low data competency. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but it's spreadsheet based, it's after the fact information, and it's leading to challenges in increasing profit, right? Spotting opportunities, understanding when you're supposed to be, when it's good to make a price move, whether you should follow the competition. And there's a process that we like to advise our customers to go through when they use the Edge Petrol software to start being a little bit braver, moving away from following that competition. We call that standing tall, bringing consistency to the prices across their portfolio and their mechanisms, trying things like weekend pricing, off-peak pricing, spread optimization to develop and build a data-driven strategy, and then start understanding the elasticity and sensitivity of their stations. And that's what's leading our customers, and I mentioned at the start of the webinar, that's why our customers are seeing, upwards of 18% in profit, 12 to 15 cents per gallon marginal gains, increases in volumes, and effectively larger EBITDAs and better sale prices when it comes to that point.
So Mark, question. So is the software something that guides you in what strategy to implement? Like maybe it's reduce your premium spread, maybe it's increase your premium spread, or is it more of a guess and check kind of strategy?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, right? So I'm going to go back to the second slide, which is it's all about control. So when we came to the US first, we sat down with a couple of retailers. The first one I met, who I won't name, said to me, if you don't have my surname, you are not touching my pole sign price, right? That's how much control I want to have. It's a family business. We've been doing this for 40 years, and nobody touches my pole sign price. And they had a lot of automation. They own 100 stations. They'd had a lot of automation companies come in and try and sell their software. And the message that we got, and we received this message in the UK as well, is that there is a large portion of the market, an extremely large portion of the market, that wants to include, I guess, their own art alongside the science, right? To keep that control with them. So what Edge does, and you'll see this on your screen now on the right-hand side, we don't recommend any pricing, but what we're doing is we're providing you with the insight to make better and quicker decisions. So if you look on the right of your screen, you'll see that we have all the data that sits there, and obviously it's not because it's on a slide deck, but that's live. That's volumes. That's your volumes live as of whatever the time is right now. That's a weighted and blended margin across your grades or per grade, right? Based on the fuel that's currently in your tanks. That net margin is taking into account your card fees across Visa, American Express, and MasterCard. So this is the data that retailers are already looking at. What we're doing is we're making sure that data is live, accurate, and accessible from anywhere to help that retailer make the best possible decision. Does that make sense, Shed? Yeah,
a little bit. And given that most of us, as you said, are pricing off of competition presently, what have you seen as best practices to better optimize? You mentioned just a couple anecdotal examples of premium spread, et cetera, but what best practices are you seeing where the most opportunity is?
Well, the problem that you have with the follow the competition example is that you're letting somebody else set your pole sign price, right?
Yeah.
But they're literally dictating the profit of your business, and that's the nature of the competition, and that's the nature of a commodity-driven market, right? You'll never escape your competition in fuel retail. But there are times to follow and times not to follow. And I think what our biggest USP is that blended cost of product, right? So really you'll have a margin and a budget and a profitability that you want to reach in your head. And unless you know what your real cost of product is, you could even be following your I mean, right now it's unlikely with good margins, right? But you could even be following your competition into negative margin, right? It's totally possible. Right, because they picked up today, you picked up 2 tankers a week ago when the price was price was another 10-15 cents per gallon, and you're pricing your fuel off today's price. Well, you're pricing off the wrong number, and the problem that's been causing is at the end of the month that customers are looking at their accounts. They're saying, "Well, hold on, look, I thought I was doing really well this month. I've just followed my competition, but I haven't made as much money as I wanted to." So we find that our the best retailers, the first thing you need to do is really start taking that a real margin number into account, right? A real cost of product into account. That's number one. In terms of particular, you're asking me to be a bit more specific. We actually have customers who will do one of 2 things. They'll be the market leader, so they'll make a downwards price move, and they'll watch their live volumes to make sure that it's actually having the desired impact on their volumes. If their volumes are not going up, they will make that price move back, right? To bring that margin back up a penny or 2. And then we have the other way around as well, where we have customers who have a desired margin, they see their competition move down, but they won't follow until they see an impact on their volumes. So they're getting an extra 3 or 4 hours of 5 cents per gallon margin, which they weren't getting before, right? So it's really there's certain things you can try and do with spreadsheets that, checking how your premium grades, seeing if you can make some more profit by changing the spreads on those. There's different, if we go back to our graph here, there are different things that you can try, which you'll get some sort of idea from with a spreadsheet. What we're doing is we're offering the software that allows you to make those pricing decisions and see in real time what the impact is on your sites.
Okay, and one last question, Mark. When firms switch from spreadsheets to software, like what you're proposing, have you seen the need for additional headcount? Does headcount go down? And how long does that transition for the pricing manager take to get up to speed with the new software?
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically the main champion, the person who wants to buy this the most when we go to to see these retailers, is actually the pricing manager and the VPs of retail. And the reason for that is that it's effectively, we're trying we've taken their process and we've put it into a piece of software, right? So, retailers have always looked at volume, margin, and competition, right? That's always been the way that they've set their pole sign prices. But what we've done is taken the data that they're using and turned it into insight that is more useful. So there really is no change in their process. They're jumping into the system. They're looking at the same data points, but the data is stronger, more robust, more accessible, and easier. That it's taking them less time, but the decision and the outcome that they're making is stronger. And that's where the profit's coming from.
Got it. Well, hey, Mark, thank you so much. David, thank you too for your time. Again, audience, we will be sending out the broadcast of this to you, and also the slide decks. We'll get you David and Mark's contact information too. So if you have further questions for them, I know they'd be happy to visit with you about your questions. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this session useful, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.